if anything interesting comes up.
What do you mean if? Who is this guy? Have you met him? Have you met this person before? He's got this T-shirt on, but I'm not quite sure if that's the same guy. If.
So today you're a 6 out of 10. You're going into the third day. Today's the day you go back for dialysis.
Yeah.
So normally that you're actually, the toxins are building up. You're feeling a little bit worse.
Yeah.
So we've given you fascial release and we put you on Nano V. The Nano V is it's the fourth phase of water. So water. Gerald Pollack wrote a book about it, and it basically, it's like we were talking about earlier. If you cut the body open, even though that we're 60 to 80% water, depending who we're talking about, it doesn't just, water doesn't gush out. So that water is in a gel format through the body, the tissue, the fascia. So this actually converts the water into the fourth phase of water, or into that gel, and at a smaller droplet than a normal water, so it penetrates the cell and it reorganizes proteins. So in other words, it stops protein folding issues, which is, protein folding issues is really the basis of almost all disease.
Yep. So if we're talking about this machine, Nano V you called it?
Yeah.
So is it water that's coming out? What's the chemical structure of
It's
the
just
stuff?
water. It's purified water. It reorganizes the water into a smaller droplet, and then it puts a very specific waveforms of light into the water. So it's a medical device. It is really good for things like brain fog, heart congestion, organ failure. It's really good for professional athletes to make their fascia liquid so that their muscles flow better. And it's only water. It's the only thing that I really travel with outside of, that's as big as all my luggage.
Wow. Well, interesting you brought up this business around fourth phase water, because the chemical structure of I think it's a confusing field for people.
Yeah.
So Pollack's the only person that's written a juicy book about it, and he talks about it, but even he's now said there are some sort of diversifications of what's been said, because a lot more scientists now are involved with this research.
Yeah.
So one of them is, if I bring this up, we'll just talk about it now. H2O, two hydrogens, one oxygen, that's water.
Yes.
That we know, that we drink, comes out the tap, for example. H2O2 is what? Hydrogen peroxide. Yes. But yet it's got what looks a bit like water in there. Because there's two hydrogens, there's a couple of oxygens. H3O2, which is what we're talking about. Yeah. Someone's called that fourth phase water, but H3O2 is trihydrogen. Do you see what I mean? This is why it's confusing for people.
Correct.
And that's why we shouldn't actually call this stuff water. We should give it another name.
Fair statement.
And
that's
Pollack,
because it gets confusing because there is no difference.
Correct. And Gerald Pollack, that's the only book that people keep quoting.
Yeah.
Anything that's going to fly properly with information, there's going to be more than one person that writes about it.
Right.
So you know I'm a scientist, and I've looked at this in great detail. The science is good for H3O2.
Yeah.
There's plenty of early evidence now. There's a meta-analysis just written last week looking at this data and saying, yes, the early evidence is excellent. It's an NIH publication, so people can check it out. It's available publicly. And it's in simple English. So the so-called influencers need to read that, because influencers actually are giving the wrong information by calling it water. Yeah. So I'm just saying that because I think there's something really amazing about H3O2. Yeah. Amazing. Not average, amazing.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, I started bathing in it. I have a device called the Tech 900, and it gives hydrogen and oxygen, so it gives Brown's gas, but it has a dongle that goes into the water, and I bathed in it. Oh. And I've had restrictions in my fascia that, I've been loose, but there's been certain restriction lines that I've never been able to get rid of. Within 10 or 12 baths, my restrictions all melted away.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that, because your skin, where your fascia resides under, right, seeing as we're talking about fascia, the entire body, your skin's your largest organ, that we used to call your largest organ, in terms of surface area, etc., etc. But it also has all these amazing functions, which we just take for granted.
Sure.
exchange of various things with the environment you're in. And if we just talk about physical stuff only at the moment, if you put yourself in a bath with some electrolytes, let's call it Epsom salts or some kind of salt that people bathe in, your skin can act like a third kidney. It has some exchange processes.
Yes, I completely agree. Furthermore, I don't know if I've ever done this with you. Did this with your wife yesterday.
Oh, the arm.
Yeah,
Go, do it again. Go on. Let's see
Okay,
if it's still the same.
It's even different.
Come on.
Okay, a little higher.
Yep. Okay, there's an expansion in your arm.
So, I did some testing on it on an interstitial scanner, which was the one that I started in my first clinic. And I went into Philippines, and the medical director, 22-year medical director at the facility, she had this scanner, and I'm like, wow, this is the first time I've seen it outside of my own facility. It was made by Russian scientists to test cosmonauts, basically, so that they could test them in space and then give feedback to them so that they could recommend treatment or what was going on with their bodies. And this device could not read me because it said I wasn't breathing, because I only breathe currently 2 to 3 breaths per minute.
Wow.
But I had a blood oxygen saturation at 94% or something like that.
Wow. It's above the ball curve. You're in this space which is between 94 and 100, which is what we call normal
Yeah.
oxygenation.
But I wasn't breathing. So the machine didn't know
That's
how to
amazing.
interpret the data. So then what I did is I said, well, she said, all the results are skewed. I can't really read the results. So I said, okay, I'll breathe 12 breaths per minute, which is a healthy person.
Yeah.
And so I started breathing 12 breaths per minute, and the machine literally shut down. It just said, cannot compute. So I don't know exactly what it means, other than because the machine is reading inputs, and it has to compare those inputs to some human value that it knows to be normal.
Yeah, reference points.
Yeah, it says it can't. So the only thing I can say is that I'm absorbing oxygen, because if I'm breathing less and I still have the same oxygen saturation, it means that I'm somehow getting oxygen to the tissue other than through my lungs.
So this machine's measuring end tissue oxygenation. Is that right? That's what you're saying?
Tissue, brain function, chakras, meridians, it's really
It's doing everything.
Yeah, it's pads, it's diodes, it's...
So from your background, we're working with the Olympic athletes, VO2 max, anaerobic thresholds. Mm-hmm. We have an ergo for that to measure those things.
Yeah, it does that too.
It does that as well?
Yes.
So there are many things that affect your oxygenation in your body.
Sure.
Things like, well, there's something called a Bohr curve.
Yeah.
Which is
the Bohr effect.
The Bohr effect is
by Chris Patel. By the way, part of his formula is wrong. When we were doing a chart back in 2011 to explain breathing and pathologies, we found an error in his formula. We corrected it because the math wouldn't work. We had a PhD at USC that was trying to do it, and he said there's something wrong with the math. So we found this, like the net sum of it was anybody that had 12 breaths or less had no chronic pain, no chronic disease, healthy. 12 to 14, had light chronic pain, couldn't sleep had disrupted sleep, but like 14 to 18 was tight, consistent, distracted thought, and then 18 to and above was chronic pain issues. So we found everybody that had chronic pain or chronic disease had a breath rate that was in excess of 20 breaths per minute.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just an observation.
No, but it's fascinating because forget the calculations for a moment. People are not interested in calculations, are they, generally?
No.
They just want, how do I fix myself?
Sure.
Right? So I'm not saying Bohr for any good reason or bad, just, oh yeah, by the way, that's something that's been used as a measure. But in fact, if you're saying 3 breaths per minute, that's what caught my attention. So how did you do that, 3 breaths a minute?
Well, I mean, I don't know how I did it because I didn't practice. As a matter of fact, I wasn't even aware that I was doing it because generally in the body, we're only aware of something that is either working more than or working less than the homeostasis or the normal. So one day I was just sitting there and I was doing a breath test with somebody. I was helping them, and then I just measured my own at the same time. It's been years since I measured my breath. And I'm like, whoa, wait a second, I'm 3 breaths per minute. And then I slowed my breath down to 1.5. And so I don't know how I did it, other than I've been following this path of doing fascial maneuvers, getting oxygen or liquid in my fascia. I haven't been doing cardiovascular. I haven't been, actually because of the travel and the tour, I haven't been working out. I've basically been on tour, working with people, doing media, and doing fascial maneuvers, getting in nature as much as I can.
Shall we try and work this out now?
Sure.
You up for it?
Yeah.
Because so I know a little bit about the organ reset maneuvers that you teach, for example, but just some minutiae about that. In terms of, it may not be minutiae, but in terms of your lungs are full of air pockets, right? But because they're full of air pockets, the surface area of your lungs is enormous. And there must be fascia around each alveoli, which are the little balloons that you breathe and exchange oxygen through.
Yes.
So should we just guess, perhaps, maybe, let's have a little punt. Maybe when you're doing all your maneuvers and all these classes, when you're running with all these people, you're actually benefiting from that yourself.
Yeah, so surface area is the most important part, because oxygen delivered is a bit different than oxygen saturation, because if we have oxygen saturation, people with completely reasonable oxygen saturation still die of asphyxia. If they...
Say that, so hang on, say that again, just so it's clear.
So somebody has blood oxygen saturation can still die of asphyxia if they can't convert it in the lungs.
Okay.
Which requires surface area of the lungs.
Oh, yeah.
And what I was saying yesterday is that most of the lung pathologies, the majority of them are lower lung pathologies. And the lung is an egg shape.
Yeah.
So in the top 25% is what's normally reserved for that last breathing.
Yeah.
But when we sit in chairs, it forces that breathing to happen,
Yeah.
which is very ineffective, causes a stress response in the body. And when we sit in chairs, we also compact right around here, so it stops the expansion of the rib cage, and over time, the lower lungs just start to shut off, and this is why the pathology is there. So what if people who normally move through nature, what if they normally breathe, their breath rate would have been 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 breaths per minute, but we don't really have a lot of data on that. We only know what we're told today, which is the average person is 16 breaths per minute. Anything over 12 is clinically hyperventilating, and most people are between 16 and 20. So we don't really have a lot of statistics that say what was it like 100 years ago. Maybe this is what it was like.
Yeah. But that makes sense. If I, as a layman, I'm a layman in your world, perhaps we can, if you're thinking of somebody hunter-gatherer, they're always going to be this sort of high state of stress or sympathetic overdrive, because they're worrying about being killed by another animal or predator. Whereas the farmer-type person sits around all day watching the wheat grow, right? Perhaps. And they only work when they need to harvest or when they're sowing the seed, not any other time, really.
Sure.
And so they have a more calmer system. So perhaps there were 2 types of humans.
Sure.
At the same time.
Yeah.
And one group hunter-gatherer and one group... There's evidence for this, by the way.
Yeah, I can believe
Yeah, but there's actually evidence. There's plenty of places that have been found recently which are showing this kind of communal use of farming versus the old adage of hunter-gatherer. So yeah, so maybe the breathing was something then as well.
I could see that. But the fact that I am breathing this right now is it's unique. And I don't really notice what my state is until I get into a state where I get pulled back. So if something happens, it pushes me into a stress response.
Yeah.
And then I have more capacity to manage it, but then I'm more acutely aware of it.
But I'm mentioning the prehistoric man to you only because I think maybe you are actually reversing physiologically what's going on in your body. That's what it suggests to me since I last saw you. I think it was 6 months ago we met.
Yeah.
So that was my initial thought, and now I'm seeing it again.
So, okay, well, I mean, since we're down that rabbit hole, I no longer have a tailbone.
So your coccyx,
Disappeared.
base of the sacrum,
Yeah.
has completely gone.
Yeah.
So you can't wag your tail anymore.
No.
How do I know if you're happy or sad? Come on.
So I don't have an explanation for it. And it was overnight. It wasn't like it gradually went. I used to adjust it every morning, and one day it was disappeared.
Well, having fallen on my coccyx in the past is very painful. So that's one less possible pain-causing thing in your body.
It did, the direction of the coccyx, and that's what I was showing in the training yesterday, is the bones and their relationship to the fascia direct the flow of the body. So if the coccyx is pulled to the left, the hips automatically pull to the right. And this is one of the things that I was showing yesterday in the class, is that when the bones are contracted in one way, the fascia in the body actually moves the body another way. Again, this is back to the thing that I was saying, that I believe the fascia moves the body, not the muscles. The intention, the whole thing about a prosthetic limb. So how does a prosthetic limb work?
Yeah. Sorry, Janet, just before we go there, Gary, there's a burning question about the coccyx.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I'm weird. It's such a small little thing. Why does that have such a massive effect on your body? I mean, you just said a huge thing there.
So, I mean, if you look at it in nature, like a cheetah, it runs 72 to 75 miles an hour. Can't run if you take off its tail.
Oh, yeah.
So that it creates direction. And it's not a wind direction. It's actually how the body moves. So when in chiropractic, when somebody's coccyx is tilted to the side, their hips will be all the way over to the other side. This is one of the things that you look for. And I would manually adjust mine with the tailbone. Where's my brain gone?
The xiphisternum, you're pointing?
Yeah, no, the bone, the little xiphoid.
Yeah,
okay.
xiphoid process.
Yeah, I couldn't remember.
Xiphoid process.
Yeah, so my xiphoid was pulled this way, my coccyx would be pulled this way. This is a pattern behavior between how the body moves.
Right.
And so I hypothesize that bones tell the fascia where the balloon of the body is in space and time, because bones have higher density. Density then has a greater, let's just say, for argument's sake, magnetic pull.
Yeah.
And so if I'm pulling more this way, my fascia has to move against the skeletal structure this way to balance me off.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we show this anecdotally in movements, and we have Olympic runners crimp their hands so their body leans over.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I show this as a way of explaining that I don't believe bones are structured. But then if they're not structured, what are they? Well, here's these observations. And what I've noticed is that, so the coccyx bone, when it went wherever it went, all of a sudden I had this mobility in my hips that it seemed unreasonable.
Wow.
Like
Yeah.
that kind of stuff that wasn't reasonable for me.
Yeah.
And that was overnight.
No, I won't try. I can move my leg. Yeah.
So there's all these. As I was saying in the hands-on workshop yesterday, I just have more questions.
Yeah.
I'm actually having less and less answers and more questions.
Well, I've got some questions for you about what you've just said. So before we get to the prosthetic limbs, I haven't forgotten what you just described to me. The NIH have in the last 5 years, have now given funding and have recognized things slightly beyond the body, but actually within the body. And they call it bioenergy fields.
Yeah.
So this is what the Reiki people and Chinese medicine and yoga, they all talk about it, right?
Yeah.
And there was always two different worlds. And what I love about now is that even the great NIH, with all the money in America, the greatest research institution in the world, they say, but they are talking about bioenergy fields.
Yeah.
And what you've just pointed to with the coccyx, with the xiphoid process, the anatomical zones, these are where recognized energy centers of being
Sure.
for millennia. I mean, these are old 10,000-year-old documents talking about this energy stuff, and perhaps before. What you're describing to me sounds like it's a body-energy connection. Do you want to give us a few comments on that?
Well, okay. So,
Can I just say, I thought I was supposed to be being interviewed. Why am I interviewing you?
no, we're not. We're talking. So,
No, I'm joking.
the way I see it is, fascia is the element of life that defines a human being. So we say that we have an energy field. I think that's a wrong perception. I think that there's a highly intelligent field around us. Or sorry, that is us.
Yeah.
As we move into that field and we move closer to the center of that field, it becomes more dense. So as you come to my body, it's less dense than at the center, which is the bone.
Okay.
And so I see it as energetics and density. And so to say that a human has a field, it would mean that we are more intelligent or higher state of awareness or being than the field. That field resonates at a higher frequency. So if we look at frequency, the field's more intelligent, and the dense part of the human experience is what we call a body.
Right.
So if we look at it that way, and it's all connected, then by default, it says to me that's a part of me. So this is the field that I work on when you see me work with people. I'm touching out here, but I'm not. Again, it's a perception, because what I've noticed is, so I create a little bit of, is this, you get pics in there.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to create a little bit of pain here. Okay, so I'm going to create a musculoskeletal pain right there.
Yeah.
Okay, that is musculoskeletal. Now I'm going to change my intention to organs and meridians. Feel the change?
Yeah. It's
Okay.
come off, the pain's come off.
Right, but I haven't changed my pressure. I increased my pressure. Now I'm going to go to fascia.
It's not painful at all. In fact, it feels like something different.
So I propose that in a quantum world that the human experience is so intelligent that if you put up your hand, put it up, and then tell you to push, the human experience matches the input. So if a belief that you're a musculoskeletal, brain dominant, hormonal being, then the body just gives us that feedback.
Right.
But if I believe that you're energetic, or fascia as one, and those are three states of awareness: the lower brain, musculoskeletal, brain dominant; the midbrain, organs, meridians, emotions; and then the frontal brain is perceptions, field. So those are the three states that I touched you in, and this is why I believe I was not able to train practitioners when I was in a clinic, because they would go try to do the work with a belief system that the body was this musculoskeletal. So I believe that even as you cut into the body, as a surgeon, cutting into the body as a surgeon with your new state of awareness would produce a different result. That's what I believe.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. I'm just trying to, if you package that up for an individual, because why are we here? We're here to share this knowledge, right?
Yeah.
So you and I can talk about this all day, but actually, how do you get person X or person Y to actually absorb what we're saying? Because it's already within us, right? You're just uncoupling things so people can understand that, right? That's what I'm hearing from what you're saying right now.
Well, so I try to talk about the knowledge of it, but there's a mountain of evidence that says something else. So I reverted to a felt experience, like we did in the workshop yesterday.
Right.
Okay, so there's no science behind this. There's no peer-reviewed science behind it, but you can feel it and demonstrate it in your body. So that you can, if I can get somebody to feel something, then I can leave it up to their interpretation. They can interpret it however they want, because if they feel it, now they believe it.
Yeah.
Now they can explain it, and their explanation can change over time. But if they don't have a felt sense of it, then they can only hang on to the knowledge of it.
Yeah.
So I propose that in our current exploration of the human experience, that we move to felt sense and experience and results as a way to measure the success or the knowledge, or to convey.
Yeah. But that's just qualitative research. That's actually part of how we peer review things, whether it's something's quantitative or qualitative. Is there a metric? If there's not a solid metric, there's a relative metric. It's called qualitative. So how do you feel? Analog scores for pain, that's classic, 1 to 10. You asked me something earlier, how are you feeling, 1 to 10? That's exactly how peer review research works. So I actually don't see a conflict at all. I think that getting any measurement from somebody at a reference level and after an intervention, how do they feel, what do they feel, etc. The things you've just described.
Yeah, I mean, it's important.
I think it's a good thing.
It's important, but we're talking about human understanding. So because people read it, don't feel it, they only walk away, they don't walk away with that felt experience. They only walk away reading somebody else's felt experience.
Yeah.
I could tell you about the ocean all day long. I could tell you about the density of the water and how the salt is different than fresh water. I can tell you about the life in it. And it has no comparison to when you have to remember all those details. But when you jump in the ocean, you taste it and you feel it, you never have to remember anymore.
Yeah. This reminds me, Gary, in the science world, they talk about RWE, real world evidence. Right? Real world evidence. It's a term used. I changed the E to real world
experience.
Correct.
Yeah. I feel that. So I'm going down this journey of no longer trying to prove the science. Now, I want to have a language, and that's what I'm working with you, to create a language so that we can allow people to go from this need, which is an addictive need, to read other people's experience, or other people's, not even experience, read other people's report of somebody's experience, to starting to have experience again themselves, that's where science actually was rooted in. But a friend of mine who's a scientist, he's a geologist, and had some young, he's like in his 60s, his PhD, and he had some young PhD students come out, and they were saying to him, why are we going to go do this? I've already read the peer review, and it says it's this way. And he says, well, how do we know? Why don't we test it? Why don't we go do it ourselves? But they don't even want to do the real work or the felt experience because they've been trained to just read and report on what they read, which is dangerous because then we lose the chance that something can change.
Well, the obvious one about peer review, which is what we're talking about, listening to a so-called scientific body or a learned body of people, of human beings, after all, that's what they are. And in fact, now, a learned body of AI, because they can't be bothered anymore, so just stick it in a machine and it comes out the other end. And one thing about peer review is when we have a crisis, global crisis, like, for example, we just had one, and then you try and publish information which might be valuable to the world, it is scuppered because so-called peer review.
Right.
Now, I've been on both ends of that. I've been one of those people who's blocked something when I've been reading, going, well, that's not what we all believe in, so we're not having that, because I'm one of the fraternity or sorority.
Sure.
But the other side of that is when you're on the other side trying to put something in to say, hey, New England Journal of Medicine or some other big journal, have a look at our work. And because we're little old people in London and not very important, there's an editor who has says one person has the ability to reject some phenomenal idea, which is why I think the whole world that we're all now in, which is this, I think we've overdone it actually. So influencers, like I told you before, will just rabbit on about repost something that they've seen for 3 seconds. Yeah. Because they've got 1 million followers, it must be true. That's complete bullshit. Well, in my opinion.
Well, this is kind of what's happened to medicine. The peer review process has become like social media. It's how many likes do you have?
Well, it is social media now. That's why I mentioned it. I'm talking about my lot, not anybody else. I'm talking about influencers in medicine. That's all I can talk about. People that I'm like, and you see it, and But there are some funny things in there. It's entertaining, and it's all the rest of it. That's fine. I love a good laugh like anybody else. But actually, some of the serious stuff is actually that billions of dollars are involved. And I think if we can take the money out of this, which we can't, but in that wonderful world we could be in, real world, if we could take the money out of this, there are so many incredible things that are out there and available to people that can help them. I'll tell you some truths. One of them is I've never listened to a podcast till Friday. That's the first time. It was a 2.5-hour podcast. I've never listened to
Okay,
one.
I got a confession.
Go on.
I've never listened to one either.
That's because you're always doing them.
Other than mine, so that I can see the reflection.
Ah, okay.
Because I don't want to. What happened is that I got to a point where I didn't want other people's opinion to skew my felt experience. I wanted to experience it. I didn't want anybody else to tell me. I wanted to figure it out myself. I wanted to feel it.
Yeah. Well, good, because that's the only way you're going to get to the real truth of the truth for you. So I tell people that their truth is the truth. Mm-hmm. It's how you perceive whatever it is you're perceiving, and so peer review is a form of telling someone the truth. You're not feeling it yourself. Like read the raw data yourself and make up your own mind, type of thing. Yeah. And the world is like that, and I experience like that. But we digress. So we were talking about limbs, weren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. So should we go back there?
Sure.
So you were telling me we're talking about coccyx, xiphoids, misalignment, and then you said, right, I'm going to tell you an example to explain this. So,
I was thinking about how the body moves. So one of the things is that I looked at a couple things like nerve conduction testing. It takes a second and a half when we test it out with EEG and nerve conduction for the signal of an input like a stepping on glass to get through the nervous system to the brain, through the homunculus, the cerebellum, back down for motor control. That whole pathway is about a second and a half, which means I'd step on glass and go 1,000, ouch, move, but that's not what happens. I move instantaneously. And so the way it's clinically or talked about is it's a ganglion reflex. And I said, I would say that's not true, because when I step on glass, I don't go boing involuntarily. I actually move in a direction to the closest view of safety, but that's happening before my brain is aware that there's even an action to move against. So something in the field or something in the fascia or the body or the skin is coordinating the activity of the body to safety before the brain is quite aware of it. And then if you look at a prosthetic limb, we can get a prosthetic limb to move with intention, but there's no connection to the nervous system. Yeah. So how does that limb move? My explanation, when I ask the people that do this, they're, well, it's your thought. Okay, well, but my thought goes through my brain apparently so how's that thought getting to the limb? Well, then they'll come to a point where they'll say, well, it's your intention. I go, okay, I'll believe it's intention, but so what is the mechanism that tension made it into the limb? And the only mechanism I can say is a field. So if this is higher intelligent, moves faster than density, which is slower, then my hypothesis is that intention to move comes from the field, and the brain is the grounding meeting of that tension. That's the positive charge that says move, and the brain starts to coordinate the movement of the musculoskeletal system to match that intention. And if there's a misalignment through perception, like when you walk on a curb and you miss it, and you go like that, then the whole side of the body creates a shock reaction, like a TENS unit, to protect you, because there's a misalignment between the intention of movement and the body's and the brain's musculoskeletal system completion of the movement. Yeah. Does that make sense?
To me, perfect. I was going to just add something, but I'll maybe get your thoughts on this. We should go here, actually. The brain, right?
Which brain?
Exactly. Are we saying the body's the brain and the brain's just a sensor?
So what I'm saying is that the body is a computing system, fluid adaptive biological computing system, which has hard drive, power systems, waste management, storage. It has sensory processing, olfactory nerves, which are very dominant in the brain and also in the organs. So I would say that the brain that we call here is more of a processing unit. Right. So it takes and runs programs. And if it can't understand the program, if it can't explain the felt experience of the body, like if you get a feeling, your brain goes, what's that feeling? Am I safe? Do I know it? Have I seen it before? And that's why, like a baby, you can give them a lemon and they don't know if it's sweet or sour, because they don't have the experience yet. So they have to learn that. So the brain is a processing unit that runs a program. And if it can't solve the program, it just keeps running it in the background until it solves it. And then it moves on. And one of the ways that I explain it to people is, imagine that you had a computer, you open up a window for every problem that you had. And you just keep opening windows. Eventually you go to move your mouse across the screen and it goes like this. Yeah. And what does this look like? It looks like a neuromuscular disorder,
Yeah.
Parkinson's or whatever. And that seems to make sense. So what I feel that we're doing is closing down programs when we do work on the body. We're saying, well, one of the bigger programs that we have is like walking is actually fairly difficult. It requires a lot of actually energy, even though we don't think about it. Breathing is innate, but walking is one where we actually have to get up and exert. And if there is a problem with the walk that's natural, then the brain and the body have to take a lot of energy to resolve a misalignment, or what we call a synaptic optimized program. A program of walking, once I learn to do it, my body goes, okay, cuts it off, hardwire, I don't think about it anymore. But it's still doing the calculations, but it's in the it's below the processor, it's in the operating system.
Yeah. Let's call it the lower brain, might be easier, or
Sure.
something like that. Just for if people are listening to this, that's probably a good way to put it.
So
Automated processes.
your fascia has, 100 trillion, and I don't even know how they come up with the number, but 100 trillion nerve inputs,
Yep.
cells.
Yeah.
Your brain has 100 billion. So just by horsepower, the fascia is 1,000 times more able to adapt to the
Yeah.
environment than the brain.
Well, just in normal speak, you have 5 senses. We talk about them, don't we? And then we say something called the sixth sense, like it's some woo-woo term.
Sixth sense.
But it's true.
It's right here.
Yeah. But that's the point is the brain, I think it's been given too much credence. And in fact, it's more of a responding organ than a controlling organ. And so, you look at it
Sure.
like the evidence is now pushing us that way.
Okay, that's the paradigm that changes the experience of exploration in the human body. Because I believe that to be true. And because I believe that to be true, my experience is pushing me. The body responds, let's say, differently to me.
Yeah, but if you take the average person on the road, like me, average person, middle of the road, you have an argument with your wife. My wife's here today, so I can say this, right? Have an argument with your wife. We're not used to arguing. So the emotional impact on my body, which is where I feel it, is huge. Can't walk properly, feel a bit sick, can't eat. So your entire body is affected by one moment with a loved one. Okay, now that's just not me, that's everybody has this effect.
Sure.
You feel it in the body.
Sure.
But forget about feeling it. If you don't resolve that matter and it's still there lingering 3 weeks later, it's still in your body for 3 weeks.
Yes.
Now imagine the stress of a person's life at age 0 till 60. If you hang on to all those stresses over 60 years, what's going to happen? Your body's going to be hanging on to all this baggage. So many people talk about this, hanging on to stuff. But you can actually apply scientific evidence to say, well, that hanging on stuff is how your hormones are working again and again, cortisol, adrenaline, etc. All the bad hormones, let's call them, they're in your body. And what happens to that? You're in the sympathetic or stress system. So what happens after that? Well, something has to stop working properly. You get dysfunction. And that's when people become ill. So the reason I mention this, Gary, is because of the work you did yesterday in the workshop, is how do you remove this stuff of 60 years old?
Okay.
So let's talk a bit about that.
Yeah, so trauma. What is trauma? Every experience we have has 3 points to it. It has an input or a stimulus. It could be something I say to you, it could be a hitting you, it's some input. It has an emotion attached when that input comes. And then it has a narrative of which I describe it, which is a triangulated series. If I have that input and not able to, if I'm stressed out, I can only go, I get the input, I get the stimulus again, my body goes to the emotion, but if I'm stressed out, I can't create a new narrative about it because my body's so busy managing the stress, it just keeps pinging back and forth. So I have to take the body out of stress long enough, a minimum of 3 days, perception cycle, in order for me to re-look at that situation. And I feel that in my own experience, as I started to take my body out of stress more and more and more, I gained a greater perception or a greater ability to look at the emotions that had come up, because then somebody would stimulate an old emotion, old thought would come up instead of just reacting the same way, which is the biological, my wife says this, I react like this. I go, oh, okay. Where did that come from? My mother used to do that. And then I can develop a new story which lets it go. So I propose, and what I've noticed in working with people is that when I take the body out of stress long enough, 3 days at a minimum and 28 days as a habit cycle, then they're able to relook at the stressors and their life and then relabel them. And then that gives it a chance for that trauma or that experience to move through the body. And I believe that we didn't have, we don't have evidence of this 100 years ago. People didn't have all these mental disorders and physical and health issues we have today. And I believe that's why. It's because we're constantly working, we're in stress. We can't self-actualize.
That was beautifully put. I was going to just say, a very wise person said to me, wisdom is an experience when you've removed the emotion.
Yes.
So the cheeky guy that I am, I said, well, how do you remove the emotion? Come on. Oh, I don't know. So you can be wise with these words, but actually I'm looking for action, looking for things that are going to help people, including myself. So can you just explain, how do you remove an emotion from an experience?
Well, so we don't remove an emotion. We remove the way that we label the emotion. So emotions in our bodies, they all have two, like in a physical sense. Anxiety and excitement are the same chemical response in the body, the same chemical array. Your perception tells you, is it excitement or is it anxiety? Confidence and fear. That's why a lot of people that are going to be actors or performers will have this fear before they go on stage. Or sadness and joy. They both produce tears. Now, that means that the body's having the same chemical physiological response, but the perception is saying one, either this is a good one or a bad one. It's labeling it. And then I react according to that. So if I take my body, if my body's in stress, I have noticed that we tend to choose the negative one or the not so favorable one. When the body's out of stress, then I choose a different one. I'll give you an example. You're hungover. You go to work. Somebody's tapping a pencil. It's like, oh my God, stop it. The lights, can you turn it down? There's no, so all of these normal things that happen around become very agitating because the body's hungover. So when our body's hungover, we choose the negative emotion. That's the way I explain it. So if we take the body out of stress long enough, then when that emotional input comes back in, because many things cause anger. So that I get another anger event. Somebody cuts me off in traffic. It's not maybe me arguing with my spouse. But somebody cuts me off in traffic, I can, they're having a bad day instead of, And that's the way I explain it to people. So we're not changing the emotion. We're changing the way that we label the emotion. And this is where the brain dominant, the brain's in charge of the body. This is that belief system. We change the emotion. We don't change the emotion. The emotion's the same, in my opinion. The way we contextualize it is different.
Yeah. No, it's a great, you're like the wise man now. You've answered my question. Thank you. No, but that makes sense. I mean, emotions are not a bad thing. It's how we process them, right? So,
sure. Yeah.
So that makes sense.
But emotions do occupy a lot of energy out of the system.
Yeah.
So if I have the emotion, if I perceive something as fear or confidence, I find that the fear, because it goes to a thought of survival, starts to create a different reaction in the experience. So the emotion comes up, but then the body's biological response becomes different because it starts to tighten, contract. The blood leaves the core of the body to the limbs. It starts to deal with the fight or flight. The food doesn't process. Waste starts to happen. So that's the difference between. And I believe that if we talk about it from a spiritual sense, that's our free will. Our free will, I'm not changing the inputs of the world, but I'm changing the way I contextualize what that input did. Did it happen to me or did it happen for me? Is one way to look at it.
Yeah.
And if I say everything happened for me, then I'm relatively in control of the experience.
Yeah. It's like the being a victim versus not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's when, the little dog who's got the tail between its legs, so you know that they're sad. And now I can't tell that about you because you haven't got your tail anymore. But we digress. But so that was a wonderful thing about emotion, and certainly that's something I'm working on myself because I realised the calmer. I mean, fancy people talk about let's calm the neurological system down.
Yeah.
But it's so abstract, you know, not many people can understand that. Whereas,
Let's take the stress out of the body. It's the best way to say it.
correct. So
And stress is not the things that happen to me. It's
Yeah.
my response to those things.
yeah, it's when you're no longer a victim that helps. So all these little steps are helpful in the bigger journey. But in the last 6 months since I last saw you, these are all the little things that have all aligned like a Swiss cheese model. You know, the holes are aligned, and that makes a lot of sense. You see, so I think I'm better because I'm calmer. And why am I calmer? Because I don't feel like a victim.
There's a purpose to this. Like
Yeah.
I went 5 days urinating, defecating, sweating, vomiting, changing my sheets multiple times a day.
Yeah.
No water, no food, and then being asked by like Dr. Allah, you have to go get an IV, you're gonna die. And I'm like at this one point, because I know that's true. So then at one point I just said, okay, my body's saying no, I'm gonna bleed my body this time. If I die, I die. And I was willing to die. And that changed my belief system, because I took something that I had believed has been hardwired or true.
Yeah.
Say 3 days without water, and then while you're vacating water. Well, I didn't die. And also the fast, 44 days, was another one. I'm moving to the element of what we believe we achieve. Napoleon Hill, well, that can't be right in this success-motivated world that we all believe in, but it doesn't apply to the body. It has to apply to the body at the same time.
Yeah. I think everyone's different, aren't they, biologically? So
Sure.
these statements that we keep, these sound bites, are like for little goldfish, you know, 5-second attention span. Oh, if we say the body's 70% water, that's a fact people remember. If we say you can fast for 3 days and then you won't make it, so make sure you drink. These are all sound bites that individuals or little groups of people have made. But you and I both know that's not an individualized process. Right. If you're going to everything's personalized about your health, right? We're all different. One person's glycemic index of food will be different to another person's. So I can have a big donut and my sugar levels stay normal, and you have a donut and something weird happens to your sugar. That's to say, all our bodies are continually interacting with the environment we're in.
They're constantly adapting.
But in a different way.
Yeah, and they could maladapt or adapt based upon on my perceptions, my inputs, the way I believe things.
So to that, but having got that mindset now that I have, and I look at people when they say things like that, I actually go, well, I wonder how they do that. Let me just have a look at that more. I actually pay attention. Whereas before it's like, no, that's not right. The medical fact is, that's it.
Yeah.
And we both know that's not true.
Yeah.
And not just yourself, but I know other people who fasted longer than those, dry fasting, you know, no water, no food for many days. And I wouldn't tell anyone to do that. Each individual, it's a choice. What do you want to do? What questions are you asking? Some people are happy to have a steak every day and then take the drugs for the constipation straight after, you know. So everyone's allowed to do what they want. However, if you want to improve your lot, your health, your body, your mind, your spirit, those things that people are chasing after, I think there is lots of evidence to say things like what you're talking about. But no one's got a system to help them. And what attracted me to you was, first of all, my sister's been doing fashion maneuvers since 2015, I think, when you guys, you know, infancy time. And we were just laughing, going, what are you doing? That's weird. We're Indian. We're yoga people. What is this fashion stuff? You know, literally that's what we were saying.
Yeah, for sure.
And because, you know, arrogance. Oh, I mean, you know, I must know about yoga. I know nothing about yoga, right? Just because you're Indian doesn't mean you own anything. And I like the fact that all these years later, when you came to Dublin, we met you for the first time a few months ago, she said, because this is what she's evolved herself like this, and she said, right, what can I do for my brother? She always does do things for me, but she thought, I need him to meet you. So she reached out to you and said, Gary, I'm not asking for me, I'm asking my brother, can you meet him? And you didn't know me then. But you did some fancy stuff in the astrology, again, another thing I don't understand, apart from I'm a Leo, star signs, but I don't really understand it, whereas what you did, and at the time I went to Dublin and we spent the whole day together, opened my eyes. That there is a system you've got.
Yeah.
You've got a trained system available online to everybody to do, and it's like any other thing. You know, if it's not expensive, it must be rubbish. Is the theory. If it's not costly, it must be terrible, because that's how we're all. Our experiences are like that. We're trained like that.
We added a price for those people.
Oh, you did? Good.
Yeah, we are putting
Good.
a training program you can pay for
Well,
now, just for those people.
I think that I think half the world can afford it and half the world can't. But,
well, I
but
mean,
good.
yeah, it's just a way. But you're right. We do have we're developing a way. I'm going to say that fascial maneuvers is not a movement system. There's 10 essential maneuvers, each target an emotion and an organ. So emotion, energy, and motion, I believe that it's a language between our field and our awareness of that field, or our consciousness. So that's what I believe it is, and I believe I'm just in the beginning stages of understanding.
But it's a good discipline to have, and I think whatever you decide to do, what people decide to do, it's free will. But they're always looking for something that has some structure. Yeah. Because that's how the brain and the body work. It wants
it's bringing back all those things that were unstructured.
Yeah. So I want to thank you for actually spending this part of your life trying to make these things happen. You know, so I know about your personal sacrifice also, sacrifice of your group as a group. I understand all those things, and I not just hear about them, I've seen them, having spent some time with people who work with you. Yeah, and so it's not easy either. So, you know, it's a very intense thing you do. Yeah. And people, you know, it's a very intense thing to manage hundreds of thousands of people. And so I want to thank you for doing that. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It means a lot.
It's an important thing.
So you've been 6 months in this journey. You're significantly changing the way that you are looking at the human experience to develop a new belief system or new understanding. Is that a fair statement?
Half, and the other half is I've gone back to a faith system that I felt out of love with.
Sure.
So the two things have come together, and they've dovetailed into each other beautifully.
I have something to say about that, actually. So if I have a belief, I need evidence. So I can get another belief to get evidence. So I get another belief to get evidence. Eventually, when I no longer require the evidence, it's just called faith. Yeah. How are you feeling right now? If you were
Amazing.
If you were to measure.
9, 10, 11.
Okay, so
15.
No. I know we've had good conversations, but practically, so what I can observe is the circles under your eyes have diminished quite a bit. Your skin tone is changing, and it's bringing life back. Now, it could be just me, but I think it also has to relate it to the fascial release that you took, which has BDNF. What's your mental acuity? How do you feel?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Ask me again. Sorry, I'm just wallowing in my joy.
What's your mental acuity?
Having a party on my
own. Are you feeling like your energy systems are they feeling?
Well, I think the mental acuity, the cognition. Well, first of all, I've listened to what you've said. I think I've said quite intelligent things back, and I've drawn on knowledge which is just given, as opposed to.
Do you feel energized?
Completely, yeah.
Is that different than from when you came in?
Yeah.
So.
I had an abdominal problem when I came in. Yeah. It's gone.
Okay, so I believe that as we do things like this, because you're currently part of your physical state, responding to your energetic state, is there's a mismatch. And I believe that as we do things like this, and you have more energy, longer and better, your body has more space to cope. So I would call this medicine, because that's what medicine or intervention does. It gives you space. And if it looks like you have
What are
more
you
space.
calling medicine?
The supplement, the Nano V, because it's noticeably. Yeah. And
so I'm going to disagree with you.
Okay.
I'll tell you why. When you're gone and the machine's gone and the supplement's gone, what's going to happen? So I'm
going to get you a machine.
No, that's not what I'm saying. It's something more fundamental.
Sure, okay.
In our language, we call it satsang, which means a conversation about a higher thing beyond us.
Yes.
And that's what we're doing at the moment.
I was going
and,
to there.
And
That's
you
part
are
of
the
medicine.
medicine and the treatment,
Yeah.
right? And people like you. So if I sit with somebody and we're having not a conversation about, oh my God, look at my mortgage and my electric bill and oh, I didn't get that nice sirloin steak and that's one level of conversation which I can have, and it's fun to have that with people. So I'm not saying not to do that, because that's actually fun. But actually what I'm talking about right now, about the thing that we're talking about, which is a very serious thing, which is about helping people and helping ourselves to be well and to flourish in this 3D world we're in, is this conversation.
Yeah.
And when I have this conversation with you or another you, a person like you, I'm always up. And that mismatch you talk about is gone. But the problem is, I don't have these conversations at 8 in the morning when I'm waking up and having my cup of tea. So.
I think it's just giving your body a bit more space.
Yeah.
And then aligning yourself with the conversation, because for you as a 3D degree Leo, it's about following your heart. And when you're living a life that doesn't follow your heart, then you're taking away.
Yeah.
And that's what you're here to go through.
I love that line because that makes life easy. If you just got to follow your heart, people should try it. Follow your heart only, you'll not have a problem in your life. You'll just be happy all the time.
Yeah.
You'll be happy for others, and you'll be happy for yourself.
Everybody should, but you in particular. That's your astrology says that.
Not just astrology, that's practical, isn't it? We know each other quite well now. It's a very practical thing, and people around me feel it. Walk into rooms, people just feel it. We were in an art studio the other day. One of our friends, she's an artist just locally, and she said, "Come look at my studio. Have a look at what I'm doing." She does embroidery and calligraphy and beautiful creative things. She's been through, like everybody else, stresses in her life, but the art has always been her kind of go-to space, because that's what she is. We walk in and there's this connection, a heart connection straight away. You just feel it in the room. She's built this beautiful energy in the room, like in here right now. But she's happy to share that with us, but she looks at me and she feels that same thing back.
Yeah.
And I think that, without any words, those sort of connections are there for not just women, by the way. Yeah. Men feel it as well, the same thing.
They do. They're just a little slower.
They don't like saying it, exactly.
Yeah. I'm noticing that lately, when we go in a new market, it's always women that come out. The men come second. So
yeah, exactly.
Well, let's go through and let's move your body.
Yeah, sure.